Welcome back, everybody, to The Mental Knot. This is going to be a segment on why. And we've had multiple discussions. I think everybody knows who we are now, so we can just let that go, right? It takes up time, this introduction thing. So we talked about judgment. We talked about a whole bunch of different stuff, right, in society and in life and all that kind of stuff. And somebody asked me the other day, how would you approach a subject? Like, say, for example, there's a negative connotation towards like mental health or somebody utilizing counseling or whatever. And it's not really about that. It's about like the judgment piece. And then we ask the question, why? And that's like an easy segment into understanding. Like you asked me earlier why I did what I did. Like, why would you have a drink with dinner? That's powerful.
And I think she asked you 3 times.
She did. She did ask me 3 times. And then
Which goes back to your 3 whys. He's all about the 3 whys.
I'm an expert deflector, yes.
Yes.
But that's a really important thing is like why, you know? And that's the segment is why. So that's what I want to talk about with you two guys, you two ladies, sorry. And back to that example, you know, you sit down for dinner and you have a drink. Well, why? Or why do you buy your Gucci shoes? Or, you know, why would you judge somebody like that? Like, where's that coming from? And that's an easy segment into the characteristics of mental health and what's healthy in a situation. And also, it's not like you're not attacking anybody. That's a super easy way. Like, you did that really good. You put me on the spot. I wasn't offended.
Okay.
But I was like, oh, shit. Right? But I wasn't, like, you can't get offended if somebody asks you why.
Oh, I think many people can get offended when they ask you why.
Probably.
Really?
But I
Very
mean, like,
much so.
Just like in the course of a conversation, like we're talking about this thing that many people do. And do we ever actually stop and think about why we do what we do? Or is it just habit?
Yeah.
And does habit create some type of preoccupation, whether you want to call it addiction, no matter what that looks like, no matter how it manifests? Drugs, alcohol, shopping, Gucci, you know.
So, you know, say it's a relationship thing, right? And somebody loses their temper or somebody's drinking a lot or whatever. That's a really good segment too, in that application too, for that same question, right? How come like you got so angry at the person that cut you off on the road, going back to my driving examples, right?
Right.
Where does that come from? Why would you behave like that? That's a hard question to answer then.
So I've struggled with this, and I actually did ask myself why.
You struggled with somebody cutting you off and you getting pissed?
I have struggled with like road rage.
Really?
Absolutely.
I can't see you road raging.
Wow.
Wow.
This is going to be great. You're a psychotherapist that road rages and says the F word. This is awesome.
I also drive to Trader Joe's, getting
human.
my like coconut milk while listening to questionable music.
It's called balance.
It's called balance, yeah.
Thank you, Shelly.
Because you're so smart and so professional in one area, then you're like, you know, get cocoa milk and rock out.
But actually, that's very much who I am. Like I do pride myself on being a balanced person, and there's days when I am super professional and like put together, and there's other days where I could blend in with like anyone else. Like I really do enjoy that about myself, and I think it kind of, you know, it's just who I am. Like
Right.
I don't fit into any one category, and that's something that I used to be really shy about, and now it's something that I love most about myself. So you never know what you're going to get.
A few years ago, I had this quote that was, some days I'm a superhero, some days I'm eating ice cream and drinking wine at midnight.
Right.
And that was just who I was that time of my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's who I was, and I honored myself every day.
I think that's the challenge, right? Is that, you know, just honoring yourself, making sure that you do self-care, but self-care doesn't mean like Gucci shoes and stuff like that. It's like we said earlier, you know, sometimes you just want to chill and relax.
Right. Sometimes it's about like giving ourselves the permission to do that. And that might be the bigger question.
Right.
What constitutes permission for us to like relax and not finish our homework before we go out and play?
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And not beat yourself up for whatever it is that you feel like you fell down on because of whatever that past conditioning is, or guilt that isn't even true.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Isn't that amazing? Okay, so there's so many, we talk about stigma. You know, Robin brought up how difficult it is to just sometimes it's difficult, like in society, right, to change like the norm or change like what's accepted or judgment and all those kinds of things. How would you approach that? Like say like you want to change the culture in an organization, right? You change culture like every day, all day long. From an individual perspective, well, I think so, right? Like you sit in a group of people that have a culture of addiction, and you change that culture every day by asking questions. So what questions do you ask to make the change?
Oh my gosh, that's a really loaded question. I'm
good at that.
I'm just a human being. I'm a human being who has had her own journey. I have experience. I have we'll throw some education in there as well. But I really try to just connect with people and meet them where they're at. I don't know that I ask $1 million questions that make people go, oh, wow, I never thought about that. Maybe I do. I don't know. I'm just utilizing information that people give me in order to ask questions. So before, when I asked you why, it's because you gave me information and I was curious and I was like, well, why?
Right.
Right. So it wasn't like this, we talked about the show not being scripted. When I go into my sessions, this has been a recent point of contention. I should have a little bit more of a script going on. But I typically don't. I like just having conversations with people. My supervisor was just you don't have a plan when you go and do your sessions? I was like, nah. I was I just like talking to people. So we actually had to backtrack and talk about why a framework is important. And I think I do have a framework in my head, but in terms of a written plan, in terms of what I'm going to do, not really. I have loose topics that I will present to people. And depending on where they're at in that moment, the conversation can go any which way.
I don't think you can do scripted. So there's order, right? And I think there's a time and a place for it. So when I was a first responder, there's an order or a standard operating guideline for certain things, like questions you would ask, right? Or with PD, there's a certain order in which you do things for risk management and legal and all that kind of stuff, right? But then also gathering information to gather data for your paperwork, et cetera, right? Making a report. At the same time, though, to gather the information, I don't think you can have a script like you're saying. And even on the show, when we tried, I would write down, sometimes I'd write down points that I wanted to cover, and it didn't work because then it came down to okay, here's number 1, number 2, number 3, number, you know what I'm saying? And then you're not genuine anymore.
Right.
And I think that's where you miss that realness, I guess.
Well, especially if you're working with someone and you're trying to pull something out, I guess, for lack of a better term, is that organic conversation and that organic connection is where it's going to come from.
Yeah, 1,000%. I am a person who I pay less attention to the content of what we're talking about and more attention to the process of what's actually going on. So right now, the process here is that we're just kind of hanging out, having a good conversation and trying to learn. Everyone is respectful and there's a sense of playfulness. That's the process. And I would venture to say in some ways it's very healing for us, because did we always have this in our professional lives and our personal lives, right? We are learning how to re-experience people with every single interaction that we have.
Yeah, for sure. And we've talked a bunch of times about just our process from start to do this show, the process of being able to be in a facility like this, number one, but then also the process of the content and then our own personal lives,
right?
Where we've come from to get to where we're at now,
right?
Right. And that's a big deal. So then you pose the question, why to that, right? Why are we all here,
right?
And I think for me, it's because I wouldn't want anybody to feel like I felt for so long, right? That's why I share. That's my why,
right?
And I think Shelley's the same way. And then so then you ask the question, what's your why? Tell us about your why. Why do you work so hard to help people? Again,
a loaded question, a good one. I I think the simple answer is that I'm passionate about it, but I'm also really curious. I remember when I first figured out I wanted to learn about people, someone asked me to do something and I didn't understand the why behind it. And so I proceeded forward and I engaged with what they wanted me to do. And I was just like, but why? Why am I doing this? This isn't something I really want to do. And I was very young too. I was probably about like 12 or 13 when it happened. And I remember telling myself I wanted to be a mind reader when I got older because I wanted to understand the intricacies of like the human mind and understand why. And so I just remember that moment really clearly. I was like, I'm going to learn why. I'm going to learn how to read people's minds. And then I went on my journey. I went through multiple different majors in school. I met some really great people. I have a lot of mentors. And ultimately, at the end of the day, therapy is what I decided to do. And it mostly aligned with the why, like getting into the human mind, understanding why we do what we do, or not. And sometimes it's not always about the why, it's about the process of understanding it. Something I say, and Eric has heard me say this a million times, is my belief is that our progress is in the process. It's about changing the approach. If we want a different outcome, we have to take a different approach.
Mm-hmm. Explain that a little bit, and let's like explain it, but then apply it. Like I think the biggest thing that I see on a regular basis is our culture, right? Mm-hmm. Our culture within the community, number one, but our culture generally as a whole,
right?
You know, like there's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of like, I don't know. I don't want to say like bowing up, but especially like, I don't know how to explain it. It seems like people are always somewhat trying to compete, right? Like on social media and all that kind of stuff. It's never like an acceptance. It's not never. It's normally not an acceptance.
Right.
Same thing when we talked about, I used that example earlier about if you do like a critical incident debrief, it doesn't work in a group. Right. That's my own belief and judgment from my own experience. It may very well work in a group if you're in the right setting and you have the right process.
Don't forget, you also talked about like your first time at Pinnacle Peak, right?
Yeah.
And you were in a group setting. You were just like, hey, that was the first time I felt this way in a group setting. And I asked you why. Right. And you just said like previously in other group settings, you didn't feel a certain way. And it's about the environment. It is about the environment that we create and having intentionality behind it.
That example, though, has to do with what you have to lose and what you have to gain sitting there. And obviously, in one scenario, you had everything to lose. And then when you're at Pinnacle, you have everything to gain.
Right.
So that's a huge difference.
There's a delta in there,
right?
So then here's my next question.
Okay.
When we talk about society and we talk about culture and we talk about like larger organizations, corporations or whatever, there's culture in those in those environments, all those environments. Some are good, some are bad. And when I say bad, like unhealthy, maybe unproductive,
Fear-based.
Fear-based. Ooh, that's a good one. Fear-based, right?
Very corporate.
Like there's so much shit that's fear-based. Even some religion is fear-based. Like I went to church the other day for the first time, like, and for I don't know how long. I don't know if I've ever really been to church, but anyways. So I go and it was super fear-based. Nothing, I'm not judging or critiquing it. I'm just saying that that's the feeling I got. Like, hey, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. Or if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. And that's not really like light or angelic to me.
Right.
I don't want to get off on a tangent. But there was a lot of judgment even in that space.
Well, I'm going to go back to the conversation we had earlier where it was about your values. So if you feel like you are emotionally unsafe, why is that? What meaning and value did you assign to certain?
That's good, because he wasn't getting gratitude, truthfulness. What was your third one?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Wow.
Clarity, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There's the why.
It didn't line up with your
values. So there's the why right there.
Oh, wow.
It answers the why.
That's cool, huh? Okay, so then to change an environment, right? Like I think we have a really good culture within the team. I think we have a good culture, and Erica's going to have to say yes because I pay him. But I truly believe that we do. I truly believe that we do because it's safe.
Okay.
Right. And it's not a reactionary environment. It's a why environment.
Okay.
Right? Like, so if I spill my cup, it's not that I spilled my cup. It's like, why?
Right.
Like, what happened?
Right.
Right?
So can I ask you a question?
Of course.
How did you create this safe environment? What was your thought process going into it?
Behavior. I changed my behavior. And I also not in a controlling way, but kind of in a controlling way, that one of the first things I say is, hey, we don't do drama, right? That's the first thing I say. We don't do drama.
Okay, hold
And
on.
there
I'm going
isn't
to
it.
pick on you for a minute.
Okay, do it.
Why is that important to you? Why is that a value that you choose to instill in your company culture?
Because it's a safety issue.
And why is safety important? I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. Like,
Safety is important for a number of reasons, right? Like, one of the reasons why is because what we do, you can get killed doing it.
Right.
But the other thing is it's the mindset, right? Like, if I say, hey, if you can't get along with your coworkers and you can't manage your life, then you can't be safe and you can't function productively in this environment, which could impact all the other people that work here.
How did you know to do that?
From this stuff.
From this stuff. Okay.
From mental health, from counseling, from trying to be as healthy as I can be, and also understanding, like, in the fire service, when people are contagious or toxic, that's the toxic is contagious. Like, it flows. It's like a disease almost, right? Like a bacteria in the water.
That's what I was going to mention, was part of it is knowing what you don't want.
Right.
Right.
So what part of where you were and what you don't want led you to what you do want?
Right. And that's the part, it's almost like a risk mitigation, right? Like, if we can't be present and we're so worried about our internal struggles in the organization or conflict, then how could you focus on being present and doing the task at hand?
Right. Absolutely.
But then also not having that support and being in, like, that fear-based mode. I don't think that living in that fear-based mode is a good thing.
That's the zebra running from the lion all the time.
Right.
Right. If you're constantly in that place, you're not going to get anything done. You're not going to enjoy anything you're doing. I asked you, why was that important to you? How did that become of value to you? It's because of your experience. It's because of your own journey, things that you've done. You've gone through therapy. You're evolving as a human being. And when we are stagnant, we often numb ourselves or we react to something. But when we are dynamic and we're moving and we're progressing, I think there's this very natural occurrence that happens where we are learning from our environment. The environment is informing us of what makes us feel safe. And so now we are responding to the environment where we perpetuate that feeling of like safety.
And then each shift makes it feels better, and you want to respond, and you want to level up, and it's just
Absolutely.
a continuum.
So how would you apply? I mean, I understand that mental health is massive, right? Like, mental health is the key.
Right.
Your mental state is key to everything in
Absolutely.
life. But to improve the productivity or, like, apply that to a business setting, like, can you use the same principles?
I'm not sure how far in you want me to delve, right? My belief, and I don't necessarily have like evidence to support this right now, but if you look at how businesses were developed in the United States, it is mostly by white, hetero, cis men. So most of the company culture comes from that place. From a place of, I'm going to venture to say, possible entitlement, possible oppression. And I'm not saying it's even done in an intentional way. When we decide to grow and to develop, it's about us being uncomfortable. It's about, receiving feedback from employees saying, hey, this may have, maybe we could have done something different, something better. And for the people in charge, right, and I always use air quotes when I talk about being in charge, it's about being safe enough within yourself and willing to accept feedback, and that's vulnerability. and I'll give my organization a shout out right now. They are probably one of the healthiest organizations I've ever worked for. Both of the owners are incredibly humble people, and they utilize an operating system that holds everyone in the company accountable. And we have regulatory meetings where we are constantly looking at who's doing what. Is this the best fit for the company, for this position? How are you accountable in this situation? I had a role in it. You had a role in it. Let's talk about that. So it's really, I believe it starts at the top with people and having the willingness to learn, to be uncomfortable, to be vulnerable. Because when we have people leading like that, people who are working for any organization or who follow, any entity, they're going to just be like, okay, I feel good here. I feel safe. I feel like I can grow and learn and expand. I'm not restricted. I'm not confined. I'm not doing something against my moral code.
I think to help answer that question, though, Scott, too, I spent about 20 years in corporate America with Fortune 100, Fortune 200 companies, massive national companies, international, actually. And they each had their own culture. One was very family-oriented, is what it felt like, a big family. It was started in the 20s. The other was, I don't know when it started, but it was very fear-based. Everyone was afraid they were going to lose their job. They would stay in the parking lot until their boss left, then they would leave, then they would leave, and then it was very fear-based. But just knowing what that was like, and knowing that every year or every 6 months there was a 360 feedback survey. You did a survey on your boss. You did a survey on how you felt things were in the company as a whole. Those kinds of things. All that information was taken in. But to try to turn any kind of culture around, or to try to take in all that information and make any small change was like turning a battleship in a, forget the ocean, it was like a lake or something, it was like not even possible. But knowing what those environments were like, and just knowing what it would have taken, and I was at one of the companies for 17 years, and having seen those changes, and as they made some changes, and that was the family environment company, just having seen some of those changes, there's a lot of fallout with people because people get so locked in to what they expect, and their lives become habitually dependent upon what the company's going to provide and what they emotionally expect, so that when shifts start, then culture starts to fall apart, which they're trying to create a new, better culture. But to the people who have been there for decades or 10 years, whatever, it's negative. So it's fascinating what it does sociologically.
It does.
And emotionally.
It does. And I think it's about getting back to basics. So if you're starting a company and this is the vision going in, awesome. And if we're changing something, I think we need to have more conversations about that and remember that we're in it together, and to ask for feedback and to be held accountable. And I think creating safety is the key to getting people's buy-in in order to facilitate that shift in company or cultural perspective.
And so in that company and cultural perspective, the employee benefit or the team benefit, if you have a healthy home life, you're going to have a healthy work life generally. You have a healthy work life, it helps with your home life. Your relationships are interchangeable, it seems to me.
So
I'm not saying if you have a healthy work life, you're going to have a healthy marriage or whatever.
Boss,
well,
you have
right.
But what I'm saying is if you have a toxic boss, say, that's going to affect your life at home too, right? Because you carry that. It almost makes it a habit because some of us spend more time at work than we do at home, right? So, that's a big deal. And then I think, the COVID changed everything. Now more people are working from home, and it changed their family dynamic, which changed the work dynamic, which, there's so many changes in that platform. So the mental health aspect is huge. Right. And I think that's a piece that we're missing.
Right. Right. 1,000%.
The longevity or we trade, okay, maybe it's further to drive to this job than it is another job. So you trade jobs because of the drive. When really you're wait a second, what am I trading here?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Or for money. I think money, I truly believe money is a Band-Aid. So if you could make, 20 grand here and 10 grand here, you're going to go work for the 20 grand. Well, it's not worth it if you're in a shitty environment.
Right.
Right.
1000%.
Like, you never make a decision based on money. That's not a good idea.
I ended up where I'm at right now because the previous work environment was so toxic, and I was experiencing like physiological symptoms, and I was just like, I'm done. It got to a point where I was concerned about money, but not to the point where it kept me where I was at. And I was just like, this does not feel good. And I'm done. I need to be done. And one of the first questions I asked the person who interviewed me, I said, so, I don't remember the question, but I do remember telling him, I was like, I want to come home. Like, I want to feel like I'm amongst family. And in my opinion, listen, everywhere has its stuff. Right.
Sure.
However, I will say that what I see being modeled at the top level is one of like safety and security and autonomy, right? Like, we're constantly being asked for feedback. It's about vulnerability. And to me, that does have like a family feel. It has something like, I'm not looking for like another job. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just like, yeah, like I love my team. Like, we laugh a lot. We have a lot of fun.
What's that worth? Right.
Everything.
It's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's worth everything.
Yeah. Truly.
Right.
And it's interesting to me because I'm just like, how come all organizations don't operate like this, right? Like,
because I think, let me answer that question. Let me just take a stab at it, is because it goes back to our culture, like you said, is more bound on drama. Like, we can bond on hating something or someone way more than we could on being positive and not having any drama, right? It's so easy to bond on, oh, that person's a mother, or look at this or whatever.
Well, think about like when we're bonding, it's a trauma bond over like negative, like, oh, like I'm gonna gossip about this person. Why do we do that? And it's usually because we feel pretty empty inside. Right. Like that drama is like feeding us in some way and like deflecting us from our own sense of self. Like, what are we lacking? I think part of that is maturity. I think it comes with life experience, with age. And I think it comes with, what are we seeking out? Are we wanting to stay in like this negative place? Are we fed by negativity? Or do we want to experience something that helps us to feel good?
Yeah. And then you decide every day, right? You choose that every day. And then, so then we go back to the choice. We do go back to that choice. We said every day you can wake up and be different and choose light or dark. And that's, I think that's something that you're doing at work too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I do think that they're interchangeable. I think that all your relationships are interchangeable, including your friendships.
Absolutely.
Because if you have healthy people around you in all aspects of your life, then you're going to be healthy.
This is true. But we also grow.
Right.
We also grow. Like, we might also quote, drop people along the way.
Right.
People who no longer fit into our worldview of like, this is who I am. And that's okay.
Right.
That is okay. It can be.
Because you can evolve. It doesn't mean they're bad. We evolve.
It doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means like we might see something different, and that is okay. And I know, like, just speaking for myself, at one point in my life, I would have been so offended by that. And I'm at the point now where I'm just like, I don't care. I understand it and I respect it. And I'm able to say that today because I'm okay with who I am because I've done so much work on myself. Right. Right. Which was no accident.
Right. Right. And it goes back to, I know I've said this hundreds of times, and even with Shelley, that the people that are close to me now in my life are much different than they were 5 years ago, right? Or 10 years ago. Right. And even like when you change relationships with your partners or 6 months ago, things change big time. And you start to reflect back and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, not that they were bad, but I can't believe I let myself behave like that.
1000%.
And you always take responsibility for the things that happen in your life. It's never their fault. And here's a funny example. This is actually a funny example. A friend of mine is going through divorce. And, she's a on. And finally I said, well, what did you do? And then it's like, oh my God, wait a second.
What was your role in it?
Yeah, because you have a role in it.
And 1000%. Even if it's just being passive, people often mistake, like if someone's
passivity
passive,
for good.
Right. like they're just like, oh, I didn't have a
good guy.
role in it, and I'm just like, yeah, you did.
It's like, no, I didn't do
you did.
anything.
Yeah, like yeah, you did. You didn't
You had a
stand
role
up
in
for
every
yourself.
situation, right?
1000%.
And here's the other thing too is like when you look at toxic, like you said, you had a toxic, and I would never, because you're smart. Like you'll kick my ass in the intelligence part.
I have
But-
really big heels on too.
But I know, but I'm going to challenge you because you said that you were in a toxic work environment. Well, why? Were you toxic? Why did you allow that to happen to you?
Yeah. So I don't want to throw any company names out there, but I was with an organization for 12 years, and it was one of the first, it was really, for all intents and purposes, the first job I had when I moved out here. Now, when I moved out here, I was so homesick, and I didn't want to be out here. And I was like, fine, I guess I have to do this. Like, I was like grouchy and grumpy and really
Victim
trying to
mindset.
like, yeah, victim mindset for sure. And I was trying to find something that like meshed well with me. And I happened to find this place where I could blend my hobbies, and I jumped in and I loved it for a really long time. It had its drama, it had its ups and downs, but I loved it for a long time. Now listen, my immediate team was great. Management, questionable. So as this moved forward, right, new management came on board. And I spent my last 2.5 years there trying to buy in to, and this goes back to what you were talking about, buy into the shift in the company. And I wasn't having it. And I can't tell. And it took me 2.5 years because I was like, am I being too sensitive? Like, am I just stuck right now? Like really taking a look at myself, my role in this. And it got to a point where I decided my values were misaligned with the company and the direction in which it was headed. So I think Eric knows this story. He's heard it plenty of times. Once again, I can't share it on TV. But I ended there in not a healthy way. It involved many ugly words and property destruction.
Wow.
So,
Sometimes that's what it comes to.
but
Probably because you stayed too long, though.
I stayed too long. I was so resentful.
Yes.
And it had been building for 2.5 years. And I told people the other day, I was just like, I don't know if I would have done anything different.
Right.
You know, if I could go back and change that day, would I have done something different? My answer is probably not, because I don't feel like the people on the other end were hearing me or seeing me.
Well, plus you did the best you could.
I did the best I
At the
could in that
time. At the
moment
time.
with the
In that
knowledge and the
moment,
resources.
Exactly.
So I moved on to another job, which I stayed at for 7 months, because that one was, I don't
that was
have
the rebound job.
That was the rebound job.
So I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to say something, and this is truth, is that people are in a place for a reason, and sometimes things end. It's not all in our control.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes things dramatic, like you just said, like we're human beings and we make mistakes and whatever, but sometimes those dramatic things have to happen so you can completely end it.
For sure.
And then
like,
just detach and
It's
be
like a
I'm done.
relationship,
Yeah.
too. Is when you
Right.
stay too long, you get past that shelf life, you know?
Right.
And obviously it's going to turn sour.
But now,
Right?
but now
Like
I go
milk.
back to this romantic, and I know you hate this, but like I have this like romantic giant heart that I think you can fix anything. I truly do. I think that if there's two people that choose, you're going to succeed. You'll figure it out. I truly believe that. Right? Like if you're accountable and you can communicate, don't smile. And you can communicate and you can stop it. And you can like, I just think that you can do it. I think if two people choose, then you can do it. Like, I just think you can.
and
Like, that's what I believe.
Maybe that's true. And I think there would be a lot of people who agree with that. And I also think there would be people whose life experiences have dictated otherwise to
I
them.
think that's where
But
my
then-
And they
smile's
would
coming
say,
from.
But then
they would say no.
Stop smiling. But then
No, that's where
now
my
you're
s-
laughing.
that's
no,
where
it's
my
funny.
smile comes
No,
from.
because
It's-
here's the thing. Like, if their experience was different, then I believe that that those two people didn't choose. One person chose, one person didn't. Or maybe one person chose something
Well,
else.
but the difference,
or whatever.
too-
But if you choose the relationship, you can succeed.
But
I
even
think.
the person who didn't choose did their best at choosing.
Right. Okay, that makes
So
sense.
that was their version of choosing.
You're killing my romance thing.
You can still be a romantic. We'll let you have that.
You still can be.
You
Oh,
can
I'm
be
going to be a romantic
You can be a
forever.
romantic.
I'm just saying.
I think it comes
Say
down
all
to
you want.
values. Like, how do you, if you're looking at a relationship, where do you prioritize the relationship?
Well, how much effort? Yeah.
How
Like,
much
what do you
effort?
choose
But
again?
it's like, I think there needs to be more conversations around what we want relationships to look like. Like, I used to be married, and I'll tell you that, like, I still have so much admiration and respect for my ex-husband. He is a great person. I would tell anyone to be friends with him. The relationship we had didn't work. I was very young when we got together. We both brought a lot of baggage. I think in our heads, we both committed to the relationship. However, there are different life experiences that we both had prior to the relationship, during the relationship, and we ended up wanting different things, and that is okay. I see lots of smiling.
I'm just laughing.
Going back
No,
and
I'm
forth
laughing
over
as you're
here.
saying this because I had this awareness yesterday that we don't have relationship problems. We have problems we bring to a relationship.
sure.
And that's what creates the problems.
Absolutely.
If we don't take care of it.
I didn't prioritize my relationship.
Yeah.
He and I were both very ambitious people, and we were out pursuing degrees, credentials, education, things to acquire financial stability. And at the end of the day, I think we were both really, speaking for myself, I think I was depleted. I was tired. I didn't have time or energy to give to my
Be a spouse.
to my spouse,
Be a partner.
taking him for granted, thinking he'll always be there, right? That was my role in it. And I don't want to speak for him, and I won't, but I can make an assumption that it was similar.
So then you go back to not choosing.
But I don't think the choice was necessarily, and like, I don't know that there was an awareness around it. I think
Right.
we thought we
cognizant.
were
Right,
choosing.
Yep, I agree. And that's the
And,
key.
yeah.
Like, when you have the tools, like if you had the tools that you had now, you maybe two things probably would have happened, I bet. And I'm guessing, actually, I'm pretty sure you would either not be with that person or
Correct.
you'd be successful.
Correct. I think.
Because you have like tools now to communicate and you have tools to be like, hey, here's
I think
my
we
goals.
would. I think
Here's
we wouldn't be together.
Huh?
I think we wouldn't be together.
Right.
Right.
Like I
we
wouldn't have chosen, and I'm not going to say, that's incredibly insulting. I think I would have chosen different if I was back then who I am now and I had the
For
tools I have
sure,
now.
for sure.
And I didn't have trauma and things like that. I
Yeah.
would choose differently. Right?
I agree with that. And my ex-husband, he's a phenomenal person. And because of like, we were so young when we got together, we were mirroring where we were both at, meeting each other's, needs, and in ways we didn't even realize. And those needs came from a place, in my opinion, from a place of brokenness, from a place of trauma, from a place of drama, like we were talking about earlier.
You
And
can't
without
give love
realizing
if you don't have
it,
love.
right?
Yeah.
But thinking that we had it.
So, well, yeah, right? Because you
Right.
didn't have the tools
You
to
only
really
know
be
what
honest
you
and
know.
be
Right,
present.
absolutely.
Okay, so now we go back to this thing. So I'm going to bring us back to the relationship, the work, the friends, all those things, right? And if you're in a place where you're not in lack, meaning that, you're not desperate for money, you don't have to have a job,
You're not
you're in a
desperate for a
place,
person.
correct, then you can choose more wisely, right? Like you could look at this, well, I'll just use this as an example. Like we fit here.
Right.
Robin may disagree, but we fit here. Like the energy's the same. The environment is good. It's healthy. It's bright. It's professional.
Right.
But at the same time, we can screw around, right? It's super, super good. Like this is where we're supposed to be.
Right.
But we chose it we chose it. And I think they somewhat chose us
Right,
too.
right.
Right. And that's where I get into this like relationship thing and where you choose to work. Like if you sit there and you actually ask yourself a question, like, does this environment, is this conducive to my happiness?
Right.
Like, is this going to be good for me as an individual? And then, holy shit, if we said the same thing about somebody that we date, like, is this person good for me? Is this going to be
Absolutely.
good for me? Do our goals align? But nobody asks those questions.
They don't.
So that's my point. Like, what are you smiling at?
I'm listening.
It's good, huh? Should I keep
There's
going?
like
No,
our,
I'm serious.
Like, our
Like,
subconscious is seeking
That's what I've been
out,
doing
like-
for 2 months.
Yeah, like our I got that. Like our subconscious is like
No, I'm not. I'm
There you
having
are.
conversations.
she's having conversations.
I'm having conversations.
She's adhering to a 50-hour rule.
Being very wise.
she already broke the 50-hour rule.
Well, she acquired her 50 hours.
Okay, got it.
I got my card. Keep going.
Okay.
In terms of relationships, when they seem to like repeat themselves.
I'm paying attention.
Are you?
Yes.
What did I just say?
You said in the relationships where they tend to repeat themselves.
Yes. When they tend to repeat themselves and when we find ourselves in like, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? What did you bring? Right? You're probably subconsciously seeking out something that's familiar. Doesn't mean it's healthy, but it's familiar.
Or a
I know
reflection of what you
to-
need to work on.
Say that
Absolutely.
again. What did you bring? Say that again. That was good.
I don't
That's a
remember. You're
good
going to have to hit the
point.
playback
Well,
button.
she
I
said,
don't know.
what did you bring to the relationship?
That's my point, though. See, that's that accountability thing, right? That's the why. Like, why is this happening? Shit doesn't happen to you
Right.
because it happens to you.
Right.
There's a reason. Well, it happens for you, yes, but
Right.
you also bring in things like you're just saying, right? You made a choice, or you put yourself in a situation, or you brought things that would contribute to the relationship in a good
Right.
or a bad way,
Right.
right? Based on what you're reflecting. Like you're almost like a mirror image sometimes,
Yep.
right? Like, I'm so amazing. Anybody that's going to date me is going to be amazing.
Right. Right. But here's the thing. I think that's a good mindset to
That's
have.
some good bullshit, huh? Shut up.
It's
Robert.
not, but I don't think it's bullshit. I think we joke about that. I think that's the key. I think it is being so confident and just being like, yeah, I'm amazing. Why wouldn't someone want to be with me?
Right.
That's how I look at it. I'm like, why wouldn't someone want to be
Right?
with me?
Exactly.
Right. And that's
Like,
that.
we should all
like,
be married right now.
Who says,
Not all of us together.
who says
I'm
anybody
just
wants to be
saying.
married?
I'm just kidding.
That's a big
I'm not.
step.
it's a big
No,
step.
man, that's like the hopeless romantic stuff, though, right? Like
Probably,
if,
yes.
if you're in a healthy mindset, like you're going to have a healthy life. Like,
Yes.
and you can be,
Agree.
you can choose joy,
Right.
right? And you
Agree.
let go of the drama and all the shit
Right.
that we just talked
Right.
about.
Agree.
And there's not going to be a sense of urgency behind like getting married or like finding a person because
Right.
you're going to feel so good with yourself that you're not like constantly like seeking from a place of desperation. So when someone comes along, it's going to fit into your value system, right? Like you're going to have shared values. Because think about this, like if you are feeling not put together and you're seeking external validation from another person, you're likely coming from a place of desperation. You're going to settle for whatever you can get, right?
And
So
you'll get exactly what you're looking for.
yeah,
Or you'll do the trophy thing, right? You'll do the ego thing. You know what I'm saying? That's another place. Like if you're not in a good mindset, if you're not in a healthy place, then you might be with somebody that may not be good for you, but they look good for you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or you create a fantasy. So there's that other piece too. I'm just going to generalize it, but people that are unhealthy can also be in a relationship where they see a fantasy. They don't actually see the real person because they don't
I
want
agree.
to look and be present and admit, right? Hence,
They see what they want them to be.
addictions and all those other things, right? And that's a big thing.
denial. It's
Denial.
denial.
Yeah,
And it's like
dude,
a delusional thought process.
Okay, so I have to say this. This is one of these epiphany things that happened to me on this trip.
Okay.
So I'm sitting at a bar, go figure, and I know, and there's this guy sitting there, and this bar is full, and it empties out. It's lunchtime, so now it's like 1 o'clock, 1:30 or whatever. The bar empties out. There's this guy, and he's like, "Hey, I gotta tell you something," and I said, "Oh, okay, well, tell me." And I like put all my stuff aside, right, and I'm like, "Okay, tell me." He goes, "My name's Frank," and I was like, "Oh, that was it?" You're like kind of kidding, right? I was like, "Oh, I'm Scott. Nice to meet you." And he goes, "I think I have to tell you this," and I was like, "Okay, Frank, tell me." And he says he was in Vietnam and he was a pilot. And he said that in flight school, they taught him the most important lesson that he's ever learned and has saved his life. And he said, they told me it would save my life. And he said that it was a lesson in perception and fantasy versus reality.
Yes.
And what he taught me, or what he told me was, and it was so impactful and it made so much sense, is this. So he's flying his plane, it's at night in the fog. And he feels like he's flying straight and true. Everything's cool. He looks at his instruments and he's in a dive, hard bank to the left. And he's like, bullshit. I'm flying straight. I'm flying true. But he looks at his instruments and he's like, that's not what they're saying. And the lesson that he learned in this flight school was that you have to look at the data. You can't live in the fantasy. So once he acknowledged the data,
Right.
he corrects the aircraft, pulls it level, and he was 100 feet from the ground.
Wow. Wow.
And that was his message to me.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, who's that? Right? This guy doesn't pull this shit out of his butt
Yeah.
at a bar.
Yeah.
Like he told me for a reason.
Yeah.
And that was the reason. He was like, look at the data. right? Like watch what's happening around you. Be present. Be present in your relationship with your friendships, in your business. Like be present. Look at the data.
Why do you think he chose to share with you?
I think it's like it's divine.
Okay.
I honestly do. Like
Yeah.
why would he do? Why would
Right.
that just randomly come out in Pensacola, Florida, in a
Right.
bar?
Right.
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 So that's where like I think you have to have faith. Like you have to understand and be present enough to recognize when somebody's telling you something, like they're telling you for a reason.
And be open.
Yeah, you have to be open to that stuff, right? I'm not going to preach and get all, whatever. But but to be present and be in that space, to understand that and actually listen to my friend
Right.
Frank,
Right.
like that's a big deal,
Yeah.
right?
But you're
that
also in a
message
place-
is powerful.
You're in a place to hear it and to receive it as powerful. Your perception is that his story was powerful.
Right.
If it was anyone else, they may have blown him off.
And the other thing too is that, and I go back to that, and you can't not acknowledge. You don't have to necessarily believe, but you can't not acknowledge, like Eric, right? So I wouldn't have met you if it wasn't for Eric.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like we wouldn't be here
Right.
if it wasn't, you know what I'm saying? Like so many things had to happen in a line for us to get to where we're at right here. Like you have to have some sort of,
Faith.
at least acknowledge the faith,
Right,
right?
right, right.
At least acknowledge that it exists. But then also putting yourself in a place of healthy. So
Yeah.
I'm off my soapbox now. That was my message. Why are you smiling?
It wasn't a soapbox.
She has a beautiful smile.
She does. She's
I think
always
that
smiling.
you should just like
She's like
just
laughing.
remind her
You
to
know what?
smile more.
You know what I think she actually does is I think she kind of laughs because she's like, dude, I told you this like 3 months ago, and now you're finally getting it.
She probably did.
No, I'm sure she did.
But you're a guy, so
Whoa. No, it's totally true. Now everybody's smiling. Isn't this nice? All the girls are
I
smiling.
just want to apologize to all the
Don't-
men.
don't
in the
encourage
Men
me.
audience.
listening.
Yeah. No, but it's true, right? It's sometimes. Here's another thing too that I want to ask you
Yeah.
is that we talked about you can't help somebody unless they ask to be helped.
Yes.
You also can't tell somebody something until they're ready. Like you
can
can't
tell
expect.
them.
You
They
can
won't
tell
hear
them,
you.
but sometimes it doesn't register for a little while. Like I know we're joking, but somewhat
Right.
serious. Like men don't process as fast as women. We're just. I don't think
Well, they
men are smart
process
as women.
differently.
We process differently, right? Like men are from Venus, whatever.
Right. Right.
Do you remember the Scud missiles from 1992? Does anybody remember that?
No.
Okay.
I was only 10.
Sorry. It was from the Afghanistan war. So there were Scud missiles that would go into the ground and then just sit there.
Right.
And then it would be a while and then it would go, well, that's what happens sometimes in men's brains with thoughts that we plant.
He's shaking his head yes.
Right? But it takes a while and then it detonates. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy.
Good analogy.
They're a little slow to the race.
Yes. Thanks, Robin.
Seriously. No, I'm.
I mean,
okay,
not
that's
slow.
fair.
It just has to sit there. And it, at the right time.
I think that's what
I mean,
everybody
I mean,
right?
like people register information differently, and
Well, and if you bring that, we circle that back to mental health,
Mm-hmm.
I know we're joking somewhat, right? But if you circle that back to mental health, it can't go unless you're in a good place
Right.
to even recognize it.
well, I mean, is it a good place or a place of desperation?
Or is it a place of need or is it a place of awareness?
Right. Either way, there does need to be a willingness on the other end. Like I can push someone to do something and try to motivate them, but if they're not willing to do the work, I can't do the work for you. I'm just
Right.
here to provide information and hold space for you and maybe pray for you and I'll meditate with you, right? But I can't make you do the work. I can't tell you how many people sit in my office and they're like, Tiffany, I want something different. And I'm like, great, let me give you homework, right? And then next session, I'm hearing a lot of complaining. I'm hearing a lot of victim mindset, which is fine. We all have to start somewhere. We've all been there, but it's like, why are you choosing to not do the homework? Why are you choosing to stay stuck? And that's what the conversation becomes.
Right.
Because it's okay if you need to stay stuck. It's serving a purpose for you. So if people are not wanting to change, that's okay. Make it a safe conversation. And you will when you're ready.
I asked the question one time to a therapist of mine, and I said, how do you do this every day? Like, isn't this draining? And she said, no, it's actually not. Because if you work with people that want to help themselves, it doesn't take effort. It actually fills you back up.
Right.
Right? Because you have a success and almost like an achievement at the end of a session, and you get that energy back. Like nobody's taking energy from you. they're like, it's like an even exchange, right? Like,
Right.
I want to heal. You're super smart and you can help me, right? Like and that fills you up, but it also fills me up because I'm healing. And I never really realized that before, but that's like in every relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, there's
Like
this
if you're feeling
reciprocity.
drained, that's probably not a good plan.
We've done groups before on, what rejuvenates you versus what depletes you, right? So what's giving to you, what's nurturing to you versus what's taking away from you. And it's a self-inventory, right? You have to kind of decide for yourself, is this relationship giving to me? Do I feel good? Or is it depleting me? And it might be in the form of, mental, emotional, spiritual energy, like a depletion. Like all of your resources are gone.
Energy vampires.
Because like you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to stand up for yourself, or you're just like, hey, that doesn't feel good to me. Don't talk to me that way. Right? Which goes back to the whole idea of like coming home to yourself, seeing, hearing, valuing, and desiring yourself. That is, in my opinion, the cornerstone of a healthy relationship. When you take people, they can provide those things for themselves. They can then give it to the other person.
Agreed. I don't know what else we say after
No, I was
all
going
that.
to say, and then the question becomes, why do we allow some people to do that and others, we don't allow it? We draw boundaries with some and not others when we
Right.
feel the same.
Right.
That's been an interesting awareness for
Right.
me lately.
And I would say, like, look at the environment, what's at stake,
What are they triggering?
What are they triggering? Is this a work environment? Is this a
Right.
personal relationship?
Right.
So many people have an easier time at work than in their personal lives.
Absolutely.
Well, because there's structure at work, right? There's
Right.
also rules. Like you can't.
Yep.
Right.
There's certain things that you can do and not do at work, right? That brings up an interesting point too. I always use that example of, okay, so every day you get up for work and you take a shower and you get dressed and you put on some clothes and you go to work and you show up on time and you're engaged and you're ready generally. Okay, so if you do that every day for a relationship, why couldn't you be successful? Because as soon as when you stop doing that for work, right, you're gonna get fired or you know what I'm saying? They demote you or whatever.
You're going to get written up. You're
Right.
gonna
That's the same
performance
thing.
improvement.
It's the same thing. And then I think too that it's somewhat, and I always get in trouble for saying this, but I do it anyways. It's somewhat of a contract, right? Like if you're, you have integrity and you're grateful and philanthropic and you can communicate well, and then 5 years down the road, you're not philanthropic and you're not grateful and you don't communicate anymore. Well, that's kind of like a breach of contract. You know what I mean?
Well, it is. And it's just like,
That's not fair.
I think one of the questions you asked is, why can we do this in work but not in relationships? At work, you're typically going to know the direction of the company and the agenda. Are we checking in with each other in our relationships? I think there's an assumption that we're doing X, Y, and Z, that we're headed in X, Y, and Z place. That might be my perception, but is that what's happening? Is that the other person's perception?
Right.
So going back to that communicative piece, are we communicating? Are we checking in? Are we asking each other questions
Right.
about?
Like, what's the goal?
Yeah,
Shit, I never did that. I don't know if I've
Yeah.
ever done that.
Are we truthful?
yeah.
Like, yeah, and okay, so where do
It's
you?
like a treatment plan. Like my life is driven by treatment plans. I get emails Monday morning. Tiffany, do your treatment plans. They're out of date. They're so important. And it's almost like having a treatment plan in a relationship. What are we doing in 6 months from now? Where do we want to be in a year from now? What does it look like in our spiritual life, in our financial life, in our date night life, in our child rearing life? Like, are we on the same page, or do we have
There
different
really needs to be
ideas?
structure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay, so that's this. So this is gonna be a why conversation. Now we're like 53 minutes into this deep, badass stuff.
Okay.
Okay, so you go back to that, right? And have you ever had a relationship like that where you actually ask those questions, Shelley?
Yes.
You have.
Yes.
When?
When I was married to Don,
Really?
we always talked about everything like that.
That's amazing. Have
Because
you?
he was an engineer and we ran our marriage like a business.
Like a
basically.
business, and there's-
but it was a business with love.
Right.
a loving
It
business.
was very structured.
Have I? Not in the beginning of my marriage, because I didn't know any better. And I think once I got into school and I became a therapist, I tried to implement those things, and it just
like too late.
kind of, we were just in a different place at that point.
Right.
I would say as I move forward with my life now, like totally. But I'm also way more grounded. I'm way more grounded now because I wouldn't know what to be looking for or even questions to ask if I was where I used to be. I'm way more grounded now. So do I have those conversations with like potential people? Depending on like the seriousness, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's healthy.
Yeah.
I think it's good. You should ask those questions. I can say in the past that I did not,
Right.
right? I didn't do that in the past.
Are you going to go home and write yourself a treatment plan now? We're going to
No, I'm
have
going to do it right here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just do it like on a napkin or something.
Your little Post-it notes.
Just knowing where you're headed. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, you head out
Right.
on your boat, you know where you want to go, right?
Right.
You don't, well, you take off. Bad analogy. But if I'm going out on a sailboat,
Right.
I have an
Hang on a
idea.
minute, hang
Well,
on a
you're
minute.
I'm going to
prepared.
look
Did you
at the
say if he
instruments.
goes out on his bike?
Boat.
On his boat.
No,
Well,
but-
here's the thing. He kind of does.
Yeah.
Here, because like you're eventually going to run out of gas or
Right.
whatever you use
You're
to get the
prepared.
boat.
Right. You're
Right.
prepared.
You're prepared.
Right.
Yes.
So
And I
same
think
thing
that's
in
the same thing.
relationship.
Yes. I
Yes.
agree with that.
Yes.
You're prepared. Yeah. You prepare yourself
Yep.
for what? Yeah. For the event.
And you don't need to know
The
every
eventual.
step of the way, but you've got to have all the ideas for the eventualities, but you've got to have your goals. And
Right.
you're going to have a good time. You're going to ski. You're going to this. You're going to,
And I don't know, I maybe we exhausted this, but this is
Maybe.
probably, I think this is one of the best conversations that we've had because we've covered so many things and it's applicable to everything, right?
True.
Yeah.
This mental health
Yeah,
and your
absolutely.
process and all those things, it's applicable to everything. It's about culture. It's about not being, judgmental, being present, all those things, that's like the core to mental health.
And I want to say this too. Everything that we've talked about here, to me, this conversation mirrors and reflects what we do in my line of work. It's when people come in, we're not just talking about drugs and alcohol. We are talking about everything we talked about here today is everything we talk about all of the time. You are inundated. We are talking about culture. We are talking about norms. We are talking about relationships, upbringing, our perception, our intentions, everything. We are talking about life essentially and covering all aspects of it from every corner because it 1000% plays into how we are reacting and responding to ourselves and the world around us.
I agree. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the moral of everything is don't be the zebra.
Yeah. Don't be the zebra.
Well, you could be the zebra
Or
eating
be the
grass.
zebra.
Don't
Be
be
the
the zebra.
zebra.
running
Yeah,
the
yeah.
line.
Just stop and
Yeah.
graze.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to stop and graze if you
Yeah.
want to be a zebra.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Robin, are we done? I think we're done, huh?
I think you're done.
Yeah.
That's a wrap.
Everybody, thanks for watching The Knot. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Robin, for what are you doing over there? Sound thing?
I
Something?
always do that.
All right.
That's my gig, dude.
Everybody, thank you for watching. Have a great day.